Welcome to Southwest Florida Happenings, a show that's giving a voice to the Southwest Florida community. I'm your host, Mary Ann Suppressi, with What's Up Southwest Florida, and joining us today is R.J. Nelson, who is a local author of a fantastic book called Dirty Waters, Confessions of Chicago's Last Harbor Boss. Yes. Now, when I first met R.J., I knew nothing about harbor bosses or anything like that, and this is a really fascinating book, whether you're into boating or you're from Chicago or any of those kind of things. So thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So my first question for you has to deal with the Chicago Mayor, Harold Wilson, Washington.
Yes.
And he appointed you into your position, and he was the first African-American mayor.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So how did a non-political person get such a political job?
I have asked myself that question many times because I was not involved in politics. I did not punch doorbells for Harold Washington or anyone else. But basically, the job was highly political and corrupt. My last four predecessors all went to federal prison.
Wow.
All four of them, over 20-some years, for taking bribes for people with boats who wanted a place to put them. And in Chicago at that time, there were many, many people with boats, but very few places to put them. So it was ideal for corruption. So I was hired to clean up the harbors. And I've often asked, how could I get this job? Well, it turns out that no one wanted it because the FBI was on everybody's back, including mine. I was a boat dealer at the time.
Oh, wow.
Investigating all of the corruption. So it was a question of nobody wanted the job because of all the indictments.
Interesting. And so, as you mentioned, your last four predecessors were sent to prison.
Yes.
For this, and they were taking bribes. Is that the only thing they were doing, or was it other kind of things?
Basically they would take bribes for you to get a slip, but you didn't get it. You had to keep bribing them. So there were regular collections in brown paper bags that were used for political purposes of various aldermen and committeemen.
Wow. So,
yeah.
You know, it was X amount of dollars to get the slip, and then every month you had to pay to
that's
keep
correct.
It, basically.
What
a nice little racket they had going on.
There were several rackets in the harbors, but that was the big racket.
And what was the years that you were doing this?
I was there from '87 till '93, and I survived. Harold Washington died in office. I survived until Richard Daley Jr., who we affectionately call R2D2, came in, and he had me fired.
And then, so from there, at one point, you were actually promoted to a bigger job?
Yes. It's hard to explain the chaos that was prevalent when the administration changed from white to black, let us say, and the old culture, the old patronage system was on the wane, and so everything was chaotic. But apparently I had done a good job in the harbors, so one day my boss was leaving. He had taken a job in California, and he said his goodbyes, and then he looked at me and he said, "Okay, Bob, it's your meeting." Now this was all of the directors of things like Soldier Field Stadium, all of the parking operations, concessions, etc., the Grant Park Symphony. And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, you're in charge." That was the first I heard of it.
Oh,
and
wow.
That gives you an idea of how chaotic things
Absolutely.
were. But I did, and there's some stories in the book particularly about Soldier Field. There's a wonderful story in there about the McCartney's so-called last concert.
Yeah, I read that part.
And
it was a very good story.
So we had there are a lot of experiences there. It's not just about boating.
So also included in this book, besides the historic data, is the morals and the ethics and all that
Yes.
goes into it. So if somebody's interested in buying this book, which we're showing here, where can they find it?
You can get it at any bookstore or on Amazon. It's published by the University of Chicago Press, and so you can get it anywhere. The the thrust of the book is how do you, as an ethical person, and in my case, I was a former college chaplain with a degree in ethics and theology. And one of the things I did was regifting of bribes.
Okay.
Not only the gifts that you couldn't give back. You know, if you got gift cards and that kind of stuff, you could send those things back, or theater tickets to the latest show. But when you got roast beefs and hams, fresh or steaks from Kansas City, what do you do with those?
Right.
So I would take those down to the Pacific Garden Mission in Chicago's slum area. But in addition to that, I would get money in envelopes, and so, or checks. And I once got a check for $500 saying, "Thank you for all you've done for me." This a boater I never met, didn't know what he was talking about. So rather than return the money and go through all the ethics committee and all that crap, excuse me, I said, why don't I call him and say, why don't you make out a check to our disabled sailing program, and that'll take care of your not being thrown out of the harbors, with the caveat that never again do you send me money or ask a favor.
Right.
So I did some of that as well.
Oh, good. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time out. It's a wonderful book. You did a great job with it. And those in Southwest Florida viewing this, please take the time to go scope out this book and support a local author.
It is in your in all the libraries as well.
Yes.
In Fort
Yep.
Myers.
Barnes and Noble. You can order it there, Amazon, and all that. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. This ends this episode of Southwest Florida Happenings, the show that's giving you a voice in Southwest Florida.